Welcome to Usable Efficiency. This is a website dedicated to improving the way that you build websites and improving websites themselves. This is episode 1 and the title is The Power of Whitespace. So a few things to note. Whitespace is also known as negative space. The second thing to note is that the color doesn't necessarily mean to be white, although it is known as white space. Negative space is a better description of it. You can use any color in the background: black, grey, green, blue, red, whatever really. White space is a little confusing, but that's just what it's known as. As an everyday example of white space, if you think of yourself as being in a crammed lift or escalator and you're packed in there like sardines, there's very little space to breathe and relax, and you're scared that you're going to knock into the person next to you and they're going to bump into the person next to them. So good white space allows you to relax and just breathe easily, just like you're in that escalator with very few people. It gives a healthy and respectful relationship between the elements. So large amount of white space conveys luxury, sophistication, and exclusivity. If you think of brands such as perfumeries or aftershave or a high-end product like that, they use large amounts of white space to convey these things. Although it's generally high brands that use large amounts of white space can be applied pretty much in any design to improve it. So the main things that white space does, it creates grouping, it creates emphasis, and improves legibility. So if we look at grouping first, so on the left hand side we have a image, basically a list with lots of different items in it, and there's nothing between them at all. So we look at the next example on the right hand side. By simply using white space between the elements, we have immediately grouped them into the categories. If we now move on to emphasis, so on the left we have an example with, say, 4 paragraphs. And on the right we now have the third paragraph surrounded by white space. So as you can see, it clearly stands out from other paragraphs and it has emphasis. Why? Well, simply because it has space around it and it's using the white space to great use. So you would make that say something like a block quote, and that information is going to stand out from the rest of the content. Once again, on the left hand side we have an untouched paragraph of text, and on the right hand side we can immediately see that it's just a lot easier to read simply by increasing the line height, or as it's also known in traditional graphic design principles as leading. So the fixes and tips. So how do we implement these things that we've talked about into design and into our websites? Well, the very first one, and it's incredibly easy to do, is simply to give a line height to an element. So that's a paragraph there, the P, and we've got a line height of 1.8 EMs. So a good approximation to use is 150% of the font size. So a 12 pixel font would be an 18 pixel line height. And the same calculation, 16 pixel font would be a 24 pixel line height. There's no hard or fast rules for this, but I think 150% is quite a good, it's a baseline figure to start with, and you can increase it or decrease it, but it's just a good starting off figure. The second fix is to simply use a grid system and use very generous proportions of white space to margins and gutters. Grid systems can become quite a complicated subject, and unfortunately it's out with the scope of this short tutorial to go into them. But in a future episode I certainly will cover grid systems and we can get into a bit more detail. This full episode is complete and can be seen at www.usable-efficiency.com. Hope to see you there.